Welcome back to viewer to Mostly Racing, and welcome back to Carlos Sainz, who superbly won the 2024 Aussie Australian Grand Prix just 2 weeks after having his appendix out. So in this video we will of course discuss his brilliant comeback and the race as a whole, taking particular notice of the Williams driver swap, McLaren's bungled strategy in my opinion, the Alonso driving dangerously penalty, which contentious, doesn't go far enough, and of course a deepish dive into lap times and race paces. So to kick off our weekend at Albert Park, Alexander Albon had a crash. These things happen from time to time. Unfortunately, the chassis was damaged, and Williams, being the team on a budget, did not have a spare. So what do? They give Albon Logan Sargent's car for the rest of the weekend, meaning that even though Logan Sargent did nothing wrong, he was out for the weekend while his teammate nicked his car, essentially. Now, we've seen some similar stuff before in the past. One thinks of the not bad for a number 2 driver race. It was a long time ago now, back at Silverstone, where Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber for Red Bull had new spec front wings. Sebastian Vettel damaged his, and so the front wing on Webber's car was put onto Seb's car, only for Red Bull to be red-faced and Mark Webber winning the whole thing anyway. But in terms of one car just not being able to run and then putting another driver in, I'm racking my brains. I can't think of a time where this has happened before, and it's such a hard break for Logan Sargent. And Williams' reasoning for this was, of course, being far down the championship as they are, every point is precious in terms of finishing the eventual finishing position in the Constructors' Championship, which is where prize money is handed out. So they made the decision to put Albon in the car, much to the disdain to a lot of fans. And it's a hard one to say what's the right decision there. In terms of business, absolutely. Logan Sargent is a cash cow. Get him out, put Albon in, try and get yourself some points. But on the more human side, it just seems far too unfair to take someone out of their seat. And yeah, Logan Sargent wasn't, understandably, very, very unhappy with the team. And I think it was in the first session of qualifying, they show him on the big screen. You can hear just all the Melbourne fans cheering and applauding him, which was nice to see. But yeah, such a hard break for Sargent. Did it pay off? Well, in the end, Albon finished the race 11th. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, the points start from 10th, so this was a bad move. But I'd not necessarily. With the top 5 being as strong as they are, so Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, Aston Martin, that only leaves... Oh, go away, Fly. That only leaves the opposition now and then for the likes of RB, Haas, Williams, Sauber, and who have I forgotten? Alpine. I think they're not going to score a point, are they? Battling out for 1 or 2 points here or there. So even though he only finished 11th, that could prove to be crucial towards the end of the season. Who knows? Maybe they're tied with, I don't know, Sauber on 5 points or whatever, and that 11th place might be the difference between, 8th and 9th, 7th and 8th. And then there's tens of millions of dollars. So as hard as it is on Sargent, I'm kind of leaning towards this was a good decision by Williams. All right. Into qualifying itself, like I said, Logan Sargent got a big round of applause being shown on the big screen. The Aussies, they occasionally cheat at cricket, but they've got good sporting minds and they know what's what. Big shout out to Esteban Ocon for getting his Alpine into qualifying too. Bravo, getting that tractor all the way into another session. Well done. Of course, he benefited from Daniel Ricciardo's final lap time being deleted, meaning the home hero would be starting second last. And yet again, Yuki Tsunoda, quite a bit faster, even when we factor in the good lap, which was which was deleted, Tsunoda was still fastest, and that makes it 3-0 to the Japanese driver. So if and when it's time for a new driver at Red Bull, I've said it before, it's looking like Tsunoda rather than Ricciardo. Tsunoda, in fact, made it all the way into qualifying 3. The notable top 5 team dropout being Lewis Hamilton, who's only qualified 11th. And I'm starting to wonder that maybe this switch to Ferraris maybe not done his mind too well. What am I on about? And I'm starting to think maybe that perhaps his mind isn't on the job as much as it should be, because this is now 3 races in a row where Russell has out-qualified the 7-time world champion. Interesting to see going forward how he performs for the rest of the season. Into Q3, and Ferrari looking good on qualifying pace as ever, but of course Max plays his hand and takes pole position. His time of 1 minute 15.915 means that was the fastest ever lap at Albert Park and the first lap at the track to break the 250 mile an hour average speed mark. So there we go. That's a nice little milestone for him in the track. The appendixless Carlos Sainz joined him on the front row. Leclerc had a bit of a mess up, so his usual front row place, not this time, taken by the comeback king, Carlos Sainz. Perez initially qualified 3rd, but was given a 3-place grid penalty for Hülkenberg for impeding. Pretty clear-cut, that one. No real complaints. Meaning Lando Norris, my boy, in 3rd place. Now, with 3 races gone, I feel like this is a good time to share this with you. So this is looking at relative paces. Not too complicated. Basically, I've taken the best times from each driver's. I've taken the times from each driver and shown the average between teammates with one small caveat. So I'm only considering times from which both drivers featured. So, for example, in the race just gone in Australia, Russell got into Q3, whereas Hamilton was knocked out in Q2. So the times I've used for my averages, I've used from Q2 for those two. I just think it's a fair way of doing it as the track rubbers in subsequent sessions. The driver showing the strongest qualifying performance against teammate is Tsunoda, who's almost got the half a second advantage over Ricciardo on average. Just saying. Now, into the race itself, and my goodness, one of the cleanest ever starts I've seen at Albert Park, with no changes in the top 5. So I think, and I imagine a lot of other people were thinking, oh great, got up super early to watch more of the same, a bit of a Max Verstappen procession with maybe some fighting behind. But oh boy, how wrong we were. Carlos Sainz takes a lap. Carlos Sainz takes the lead on lap 2 around the outside of Verstappen at the fast chicane 9-10. Is it 9-10? I think it's 9-10. Initially, it seemed as if it was a mistake from Max, but what was this? There was smoke coming out of the back of the Red Bull. Somehow, meaning I don't think a reason has been given yet, but his rear right brake was stuck on. So even when he's going full throttle down the straights, his brake is slightly on, so slightly rubbing, generating more heat than a McDonald's apple pie, until the brake eventually caught fire and even blew up as he came into the pit lane, meaning Max had to retire for the first time in two years. It's taken him to retire from a race. It was Australia last time as well, in 2022, so how about that? So our order on lap 5 was Sainz first, Norris second, Leclerc third, Piastri fourth. So what's that? That's McLaren versus Ferrari. Probably zoomed in so you can't see them, but all my cars, most of my cars up there are late 90s, early 2000s. That's when I first started watching the racing, so McLaren versus Ferrari holds particular importance in my heart. So it was good to see we had that battle revitalised once more. So our earliest top runner to pit was Hamilton at the end of lap 7, start of lap 8, going from mediums onto hards, and teammate George Russell joined him a lap later. And that really set the tone for what we saw with strategies. The hards, the C3 tyre was the way to go for the race. The medium tyre, not a viable tyre at all, dropped off very quickly within 10 laps or so. Maybe they should have, the Formula 1 should have gone a step harder with the tyres. So C's 2, 3, 4 rather than 1, 2, 3. But hey, can't complain if your dominant strategy involves you taking more than one stop. So didn't want a repeat of Saudi, but maybe they could have gone just one step harder, perhaps. So now our next point of interest is in what, in my opinion, was a mistake from the McLaren team. So Leclerc was pressuring Lando on lap 8. He did a half-hearted move at the far chicane, which sort of drops him back a little bit, which put Piastri right on his tail. So Lando's got a bit of air between him and Leclerc, and then Piastri's right up close behind. But clearly Ferrari had the pace. Now, confusingly, when Ferrari pits Leclerc on lap 9 for an obvious undercut on Norris, McLaren decided to pit Piastri instead. And that baffled me quite a bit, that did, because I don't know if McLaren thought they'd be able to do Piastri's stop a second, or to get ahead more like 3/4 of a second faster than Leclerc's. And to be fair, this is Ferrari up Ferrari, and they will always find a way to mess things up. And McLaren are the best at pit stops, you have to say. But following someone into the pits, you're almost certainly likely to come out behind again. So Leclerc, 9 times out of 10, is going to maintain his position over Piastri. Meanwhile, Lando sort of just left out to dry, continuing on his dying medium tyres. So I don't know if McLaren were hoping that there'd be higher degradation, perhaps. So leaving Lando out would pay dividends later on, having a mega pace advantage towards the end of the race. But in any case, Lando had a 0.78 second gap to Leclerc on lap 8, to them being 5.457 seconds behind, and behind Piastri too when he eventually made his stop a few laps later. So a very poor move in my opinion. And Lando and Oscar almost came together, didn't they, turn 1 as Lando came out, definitely costing both of them time. But hey, from one bad strategy to a good one. Well, maybe a lucky one. On lap 12, Hamilton's disappointing season continues when his power unit gave out and forced him out of the race. To recover his car, the virtual safety car was deployed, and Fernando Alonso being different, meant he was the only top runner to start on hards, and was up to second place because he hadn't made his pit stop, whereas everyone else had. So as a virtual safety car comes out, you get a cheap pit stop with everyone running slower on track, and comes out in 5th place. Bear in mind he was in 10th before the pit stop phase started. Now, I do enjoy seeing Alonso do well, as much as a Nick's racing fan. Fun fact about Nick, I actually grew up in Spain, and my passion for Formula 1 is somewhat attributable to Fernando Alonso's success in the mid-2000s. But I do think it's a bit unfair that you get such an advantage pitting under the safety car, or under the virtual safety car. So I'm interested to know if people think there should be some kind of advantage prevention rule put in place. I'm not a fan of the IndyCar, yellow comes out, pits are closed system, because that can just utterly kill races. Zero fault of the driver that it affects. But if up to me, I'd have it so if a virtual safety car comes out or a safety car comes out, pull into the pits. I think they should then hold you for 5 seconds, like they do for a time penalty, before they can then work on the car. I just think it'd just be a little bit fairer that way, just so there's not that massive advantage, but at the same time doesn't kill you for not pitting earlier. We've seen it before in Australia that it's even affected the race, like who wins the race, making a cheap pit stop. But maybe it's more entertaining that way, a bit of randomness. Do let me know. Would you keep it as the way it is, or would you, like me, would like to see something put in place to cap the advantage? So, after the VSC restart and everyone having made their first stops, we were treated to something very rare these days. The top runners all quite close to each other. From laps 19 to 29, I'll put up my little chart here. The top four were within 10 seconds of each other. And it would have been nice to see if there was a bit more pressuring each other for positions and maybe even a bit of battling. But yeah, it's definitely enough there to keep the viewers interested, seeing the cars closer together. One lock up, and then you're going to see a change in the podium places. So there's jeopardy there, but you do feel as if they were sort of just maintaining their ties a bit rather than fighting each other. Not to the extent of the IndyCar race, though, which I will not talk about because it does not deserve to be talked about. If you watched it, you know what I'm talking about. Good. Now, while talking about these top places, there's one driver conspicuous by his absence, Sergio Perez. Now, I bigged up Perez in the last couple of videos, saying he looks more comfortable in this year's Red Bull, and he was doing what he needed to do to keep his seat for next year. If Max is out front winning races, then be second. In Australia, however, his pace, relatively speaking, was nowhere. He passed Russell soon after the VSC restart, and then for the rest of the second stint, he was on average about half a second slower than Carlos Sainz out in the lead. Even when Perez passed Alonso, he wasn't able to pull away. Alonso sat on his tail quite happily. By the time he made his second stop, he was already the thick end of half a minute off the lead in 5th place. So I hope for his sake this was just a bit of a blip, because he has been mighty in the 2 races before at Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. And hopefully this isn't a continuation of his form from last year, because Red Bull don't mess around when it comes to slow drivers. In terms for the top places, sadly that was pretty much it. Sainz controlled his pace very well. Lando's slightly alternate strategy, going longer in the first stint, it definitely made him a bit faster lap times. But he never really got close enough to properly challenge Leclerc. Behind, Piastri fell off the train a bit after he had to swap places with Lando, and no protests from Oscar at all. Was there? Oscar changed places, did it almost immediately. It takes a lot. It would take a lot to get that man upset, I think. And then he took a small excursion across the grass, sort of reinforcing the idea that he's very fast, but maybe struggles on longer stints. Going into the end of the race, as Carlos crossed the line to start the final lap, we then get to our biggest talking points, other than the actual race itself. George Russell, pressuring Alonso for 6th, crashes at the exit of 6, start of 7. Now, George Russell binning it isn't too noteworthy in itself, especially if Carlos Sainz wins for some reason. But there was fury at what happened post-race, because Fernando Alonso was handed a 20-second time penalty for potentially dangerous driving, that 20 seconds being a converted, the time equivalent of a drive-through. Now, when I saw it, I thought, how on earth can they penalise Fernando for what just seemed like nothing? Like, a driver's not allowed to defend their positions anymore? Now, the stewards gave a lengthy explanation of their reasoning, and going through it, I actually find myself almost agreeing with it. Almost agreeing with it. Here it is. There's a lot there, and I feel like as there's so much writing and so much of an explanation, they sort of know that it's going to irk people, and they felt the need that they have to really make themselves clear. So here we go. So Fernando Alonso, drive-through penalty imposed, converted to 20 seconds added to the elapsed time of the race in accordance with blah 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 blah. So in this, it says that Alonso explained to the stewards that he intended to approach turn 6 differently, and I think that's quite a crucial thing already. He lifted earlier and with less speed into the corner to get a better exit. Alonso was struggling with D-rates on his battery pack, so he would have had less power towards the end of the straight into straight, and at the end of the wobbly. Double DRS as well. So what Alonso was trying to do, take that corner differently, get a better exit, and to try and maintain higher speed to prevent Russell getting too close to make the overtake. Now, Russell came up behind Alonso. Now, how did Alonso drive differently? How did he take the corner differently? And I think this is the damning evidence. So Alonso lifted slightly more than 100 meters earlier than he had going into that corner during the race. He also braked slightly at the point where he did not usually brake, and even downshifted. Now, I think that's fine. The issue is he then, before the corner, then accelerated again before braking again. So he's gone into the corner, slowed, accelerated, slowed. And I think it's that double slowing which is causing the potentially dangerous aspect to it. And as the stewards say, this manoeuvre created a considerable and unusual closing speed between the cars. They also say, sort of preempting the storm that came after the decision, should Alonso have the right to try a different approach to the corner? ? Yes. Should Alonso be responsible for dirty air that ultimately caused the incident? ? No. But they eventually concluded that he did, regardless of intent, and they sort of specify that it doesn't matter that George crashed anyway, which I think's not buying that one. But they came to the conclusion that his driving was extraordinary, braking, downshifting, and all the other elements of the manoeuvre. And they found that the double slowing and the just how early it was into the corner than what he'd done before, it was that what they found to be potentially dangerous. Alonso sort of came out and said that, should my driving at like San Marino 2005 against Schumacher, was that potentially dangerous as well? I think that's sort of missing the point a bit. There's good defensive driving. And I am sort of siding with the stewards on this one, that the double slowing it probably was a bit dangerous. A drive-through penalty for that, though, I think is far too harsh. If Russell hadn't crashed, I think at the very most he would have come onto the radio saying, that was a bit iffy, and then maybe Alonso would have had a driving standards flag, and at the very most a 5 seconds penalty. But I think because Russell then binned it, which he may have done anyway, George Russell being George Russell, I think that's undoubtedly factored into the severity of the penalty, even though the stewards have specifically stated that the outcome was not, the penalty was not influenced by the outcome of Russell crashing, which I think is bull, quite frankly. But in any case, let me know. Do you agree? I bet you don't. But yes, with George, the remains of George Russell's car strewn in the middle of the road, the race was neutralised with a virtual safety car. People saying it should have been red flags. What's the point of that? They can't just stop him in place on the track. So I think VSC is fine. Carlos Sainz, having been sacked by the team, having missed a race with appendicitis and being replaced by Oliver Behrman, who had a shocker, by the way, in F2, comes home to win his third Grand Prix victory. And the guy is class. Because even though he's been sacked by the team, as he approached the checkered flag, he said on the radio that he was going to slow right down to allow Leclerc to get closer so they could have a nice photograph finish of the two of them coming over the line in close proximity. So what a team player, what a classy guy. I hope he gets the top seat for next year. Leclerc finished second, so Ferrari 1-2. Lando Norris finishes on the podium once more, and what is significant about him finishing on the podium this time more so than any others? He is now the driver with the most podium finishes without winning a race, surpassing Nick Heidfeld. It'll come, Lando, it'll come. And a wonderful ovation for Oscar Piastri coming home in fourth, the joint highest finish of an Australian at the Australian Grand Prix. So well done, sir. Back further in the field, Haas incredibly picks up a double points finish. That's their second race in a row where they finished in the points, with Albon just behind, having put up a good race between those three. And again, I think that 11th place somewhat justifies their decision to put him instead of Logan Sargent. Overall, I'd give the race 6 out of 10, which is the 4th time I've given the Australian Grand Prix this score. I think a lot of people were saying this race was more exciting than it was just because of the Maxless factor. The fact that we're guaranteed to see something different this time just because Max wasn't in it, which it happens during domination years. So during like the Schumacher era, the second when he wasn't in a race, it just seems a bit more exciting. When Hamilton's out of a race, it seems more exciting. And yesterday, as I record this, seeing Max go out immediately grabs your attention and really pulls you in, and you enjoy it a lot more. But yes, 6 out of 10, so above an average race, I'd say, above par or below par, because below par is what you want in golf. Anyway, so while there was excitement seeing Max go out, there wasn't much in the way of wheel-to-wheel stuff up at the front. There was some good battling down the field. Carlos built himself a decent enough lead and controlled the pace, while Leclerc jumped the McLarens, jumped Norris, and the latter couldn't really get close enough to really pressure and try and get that place back again. But seeing the cars close together and having a different winner, yeah. And I think that is it for my notes. So I shall say thank you for watching, and next race is, believe it or not, 4th race of the year. We're at Japan. The first time that Japan has been an early season race. So until then, this has been Mostly Racing. I've been Nick. Thank you for watching.